Okay, wonderful. Hi, hello everybody, and good afternoon or good evening or good morning from wherever you're joining us for this wonderful webinar featuring former member of Knesset, Ayelet Nahmias Verbin, on behalf of my great and powerful colleague Alan Langer, and on behalf of my partner in the work of the Miriam Institute. I want to say thank you, Ayelet, for being with us today. We're very much looking forward to this conversation.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And just before I get going and come to some questions, I want to just refresh everybody's memories about who you are now. Ayelet, I have not put forward your full bio because that would squander all of the time that we have. So I'm going to touch upon some highlights and then move on with the interview.
Highlights are enough.
So for everybody who's here with us, former member of Knesset, Ayelet Nahmias Verbin was elected to the 20th Knesset on behalf of the Zionist Union. She holds an LLB from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and an LLM in commercial law from the Tel Aviv Berkeley program. She's a lawyer and an industrialist by trade. She began her political career accompanying former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin prior to his election as Prime Minister, and later as assistant to the legal advisor in the Prime Minister's office following Rabin's assassination. Nahmias Verbin worked to set up the Israel branch of the International Organization of Female Directors, which aims to promote female participation in decision-making centers. Within the confines of her public activities and as a wife of a colonel in the reserves in the Armored Corps of the Israel Defense Forces, Nahmias Verbin also set up the Community of Families of Reserve Duty Soldiers, which aims to reinforce the bond between the families of reserve duty soldiers and the Israel Defense Forces. She was a member of the Economic Affairs Committee, the Committee for the Rights of the Child, the Subcommittee for Public Transportation, and the Subcommittee for the Promotion of Small and Medium-Sized Businesses. In addition, she chaired the Lobby for Industry in Israel, the Lobby for the Israeli Family, and the Blue and White Lobby, not to be confused with the political party, the Blue and White Political Party, among others. Nahmias Verbin also headed the Israel-Greece Parliamentary Friendship Group. She lives in Tel Aviv, she's married, and she is the mother of 3. So thank you again, Ayelet, for being with us today. First of all, how are you?
I'm okay these times. As I told you before we went on, I'm a Zoom bee because I've been on Zoom all day. And the only thing that we can trust nowadays is that one of my children will holler once we are in a Zoom conversation. There is nothing that is more certain than that, than once the mommy goes on, then they also get off. It's crazy.
Well, I think that every single person on this call who's a parent is partner to your frustrations there. Everybody's working from home, so don't feel self-conscious at all. And
thank you so
I want to begin, actually, Ayelet, by referring back to a paper that you wrote for the Miriam Institute. And I'd encourage everybody to read it. It's up on our site, and we also had it published. And it was prior to the last round of elections. And you wrote the following. You wrote that among all of the threats facing the state of Israel, internal division and polarization are the most severe. Without internal cohesion, Israel will not be capable of taking on external threats. However, with unity and solidarity, Israel can overcome any challenge. Now, I looked at the swearing in of the new Knesset. It's been referred to variously, Ayelet, as a temporary government. It's been referred to as a transitional government. It's also been referred to as a unity government. It didn't look like a unity government when I was listening to some of those speeches. Assess for us the viability of the government that the state of Israel now has, and does it have the unity that you call for in your position paper?
I think that's a major question. I think the intention is there. As I tend to say, national unity doesn't mean national uniformity, and these are two different things. We can say for certain that at the moment it is in the interest, and I'm speaking on the political interest, it is of the political interest of both Benjamin Netanyahu and Benjamin Gantz to stay together, to stick together. Netanyahu is going to court next week for the reading of his indictments. And it's gonna be a very rocky situation. So in that respect, I think he has an interest to maintain this government. It's far from being perfect. It's too big. There are things, obviously, where I come from, and these days, obviously, I'm back in the private sector, but there are things, that personally, ideologically, I had to, before I went and supported Gantz in his move, I had to overcome issues that were very, very important to me, such as the rule of law. But what I keep saying to myself is that we have, for instance, we have a new Minister of Justice, and he just needed to listen to the rhetorics and the toning yesterday when it comes to the rule of law. And in that respect, I'm satisfied. I was also very, very close with Bougie Herzog, who used to be the head of the Labour Party. And I'm a person who tends to kind of critic myself, did I do the right thing as a politician? And when he wanted to join the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, we held him back. And I think looking back that it was a mistake, because it is very, very difficult to have your hands on the wheel. And had we had our hands on the wheel, there were a lot of things that we could have prevented. And this goes, to the political system in Israel, which is a coalition system. It's a parliamentary system. And it doesn't allow you don't have the privilege. It's not Senate and Congress. It's not that you have the Democrats and Republicans, and you can stop a lot of the things, that the president brings onto the floor. In Israel, being opposition is much more difficult to stop certain moves. So in that respect, I hope mainly that the rhetorics will change, and, that the sound bites that we will hear will be different.
I do think that Benny Gantz has brought a certain amount of dignity to the position that he holds, and he's actually carried himself throughout the numerous campaigns with that dignity. Now, I don't know how effective a campaigner he is. I don't know how effective a politician he is. I don't know how effective an alternate prime minister he will be, if he indeed ever gets the opportunity to become the prime minister. But there are a lot of comparisons, Ayelet, before I come into some more of the details about the government, that are made between Benny Gantz and Yitzhak Rabin. Now, some people say that is a real comparison. Others say it's quite a lofty comparison and not actually accurate. Do you see traits of that dignity that Rabin was known for in Benny Gantz? And are you refreshed by that if you do?
When I decided not to run again last year, the day before the elections in April, the first round, it was Yitzhak Rabin's grandson who asked me to come and support Benny Gantz. It wasn't an easy move, not because I don't like Benny Gantz. I've known him for many, many years. He actually gave my husband his ranks. I think I would like to avoid the comparison. I think we live in very, very different times. I think Yitzhak Rabin was exceptionally outstanding in many, many respects. And I think that the comparison doesn't do any of them any kind of justice. They're different people. I do want to say that I think Benny has held himself in a manner which is not, it wasn't easy. It was far from being easy. I was, texting with him and I was speaking to him. It was very, very difficult. He was very, very violently attacked from the right. And now he's very, very violently attacked from the left. Mm-hmm. This is not an easy thing. This is not an easy task. I can tell you, as a person who was, as I always tell you, I'm a very, very extreme centrist. I've been in that position, well, obviously different position because I've never run for that kind of office, but still, when I was in a similar position, it was very, very difficult to carry on. And he has carried on. It's going to be interesting. Actually, this evening he's giving his first interview after entering the Ministry of Defense and becoming alternate prime minister. So it's going to be very interesting to listen to him. I texted with him on Sunday night. He really appreciated this. Obviously, he really appreciated the support in the sense that it wasn't obvious. It wasn't obvious, and it's not easy. But still, I decided it was the right thing to do at this time.
And now to the other individual with whom he's partnering, of course, Netanyahu. You again in this paper, you said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ability to get re-elected rests predominantly on his ability to engage the public through the force of his personality. That in itself is not problematic. It's a talent that Netanyahu was born with. What are the other talents that enable Netanyahu to be reborn time and again as Israel's prime minister? Just when they think that he's out for the count, he comes raging back. Tell us a bit about him as a political operative, if you would.
First of all, it's nice to listen to what I wrote because I was right. It's nice to understand that sometimes looking back on things that I wrote, I say to myself, oh my God, what was I doing? What was I thinking? I think Netanyahu by far is a magician, in many, many senses. He's a political mogul. He understands politics better than anyone. He knows where to press and where to kind of lay back and not do anything. He is under pressure. I mean, it was interesting to see when he was assembling the government, especially on the Likud side. It was interesting to see that he can be under some pressures, for instance, by Minister of Energy, Yuval Steinitz. He wasn't going to give him an office. He wasn't going to give him a ministry. And a few hours later, he changed it. So you can push the right buttons when it comes to Netanyahu. Something that is very, very obvious about him, that he has no sentiment. It's no sentimentality in the sense that he's not concerned and he's not afraid of. I mean, if you're with him, you need to be with him 150%. It's not enough to be with him 80%. For instance, he would totally, kind of computerize the algorithms. He was with me. I mean, he was interviewing in favor of me, but he wasn't attacking the Ministry of Justice, okay? He would calculate that. He's a very talented man, and, he has the ability to read the picture very, very well. But unfortunately, from my perspective, he is very, very much under the impression still, and this is his fifth government, under the impression, under the sense that he's being persecuted. And he has created an atmosphere around him where, again, you're either with him or you're against him. I mean, it's not enough to be with him in certain things. You need to be with him all the way. And that, in that respect, I'm saying to myself, oh my God, this man, because truly, he passed Ben Gurion and, the number of days that he's been ruling Israel, and he still needs that kind of reassurance. And, it's from my perspective, it's sad, because I do think that Netanyahu of before 2015 could have been really, really one of the greatest leaders of Israel. Now, in many senses, as you well know, even though I was he's a rival, he's an ideological rival, there were a lot of things that I thought that Netanyahu was right about. And I'm not just talking about the obvious things like Iran and other things, that, it took the world some time to be convinced with. But the one thing that he hasn't done right, and for someone who has been in office since 2009, and that, brings us back to what I wrote for the Miriam Institute, the fact that he is unable to hug his opponents, but in a real way. I'm a person that he was able, because the state means more to me than anything else. Okay, for me it was, I never, the orders the orders never changed. It's the state, it's the party, it's me. I come last. As a politician, it never changed. For him, unfortunately, l'état c'est moi has become something that is leading the way. Again, even when he does the right things, I've always, I kept saying to him, you need to hug your rivals. The fact that I come from, even if it's the center left, I hate saying, when I say center left, it's kind of apologetic. I don't apologize for my ideology. I don't apologize for my opinions. But the fact is that he has made left in Israel look diabolical. And that is a very, very bad thing. Now, when we are in a national unity government, or somewhat national unity government, I do hope that it will change. I do hope that it wouldn't have a choice but to act differently.
I have another couple of questions about that, actually. And before we go through that, I want to just correct an error that I made at the beginning of the call, Ayelet, which is I'd like to ask my great and powerful colleague, Alan, to please instruct people how they can ask questions as we're going through this. So, Alan, if you can just let us hear your voice from on high for a moment and tell us how people can do that.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So for people using the computer, there is a control panel. On the bottom, it should say Q&A. If you click on that, you should be able to submit a question and answer. That is the way to do it through the computer. Through a cell phone, there should be a similar control panel with a Q&A button, and you should be able to submit your questions, and they will be read on air. Thank you very much.
Great, and I appreciate that, and obviously, Alan, you'll send me the other questions that were submitted in advance for Ayelet. But please, do, everybody on the call, do pose your questions, because I can tell you, Ayelet, somebody who really revels in the opportunity to take the toughest of questions. So let me ask you another couple of questions quickly about the coalition, because you've got a heady topic for today's talk, Ayelet. I decided to call the talk who wins out of Israel's government? Who benefits from Israel's current government? And then to talk about defense, diplomacy, and the diaspora. So we're going to get to all of that in the time that we've allotted.
Sure.
But I just want to ask a couple of very quick questions about the coalition. Number one, Netanyahu seems also unable to hug his friends. It's not just an issue of hugging his opponents. And I mean ideologically. And you see that very much with Naftali Bennett. Now, Naftali Bennett and, of course, Ayelet Shaked, these were rising stars. They're now out of the government. They're not there as part of the coalition. What's the future for them? Are they just going to be, in walking around until such time as Netanyahu is not the head of the Likud and then fold in? Or do they have another future as you see it?
I think that's a very, very difficult question. I think that Ayelet, who's really a very, very talented person, and I will dedicate a few sentences for Naftali, because I think he was a very good Minister of Defense during the COVID-19. I think Ayelet should have, when they didn't go into the Knesset in April, Ayelet should have had a time out up until the point that she could be invited into Likud. You mentioned Netanyahu, the kind of animosity that Balfour, which is where the Prime Minister resides, if somebody doesn't know, the kind of animosity that they hold for Ayelet and Naftali is something really out of this world. And I can only tell you that I was there to see Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres in person. So there was no much greater animosity in Israeli politics than that. And I can tell you, by far, this is a much greater animosity. He doesn't want them around. Now, he knows that politically, he's going to have a problem when the Trump plan comes to some kind of a more serious debate. He's going to be challenged from the right by them. So it's going to be a very, very difficult loop for him, and it's going to be interesting what he's going to do. And I'm not just talking about the annexation, because a lot of the people, I don't know if you went deep into the program, there's so much more to it than the annexation. There is a plain and simple Palestinian state there. I mean, and that is something obviously that Naftali and Ayelet don't like, and the people who send them to the Knesset. I think at one point they kind of lost touch with reality, in the sense that they didn't understand that a lot of the people that they will have once upon a time were their voice in the Knesset, found their voice in Likud. Now that is a little bit similar, you'd be interested to hear, that's a little bit similar to what happened to the Labour Party. Because, we also lost most of our power in past years. That was one of the things that I was trying to warn that is going to be happening when I decided not to run. That was the main reason, because I kind of lost ideological touch with the party that I grew up in. And in that respect, blue and white was much more relevant for voters like me. And that is why they got most of the votes of the Labour Party. That is very, very obvious. By the way, both fractions are in full cooperation now in the Knesset. So question has it, what Netanyahu, again, it's the personal animosity you need to bear in mind, because, again, he didn't with Aryeh Deri from Shas, with Yehadut Torah, relationship, and again, I'm speaking about the right bloc, things are dandy or almost dandy. But with Yamina, with Naftali and Ayelet, there is something personal, very, very basic. He managed to pull Rafi Peretz from from Yamina and bring him again, because it wasn't we know the Hungarian cube, when you have to fix all the colors in the same place. They weren't really attached. There wasn't real personal commitment in there. So it was easy for him to dismantle, just as it was easy for him, unfortunately, at a certain point to dismantle blue and white.
So let's move a little bit now to diplomacy and the diplomatic challenges for the state of Israel.
Yeah.
Gilad Erdan is being dispatched to be ambassador to the United Nations and also to the United States of America once Ron Dermer vacates his position at the changing of the guard of prime ministers in the state of Israel. What are the big challenges that are in front of Gilad Erdan in that position, apart from just being extremely busy, obviously? And is he up to those challenges? And why has he been politically appointed? I'll tell you why I asked that question. When Danny Danon was dispatched to the United Nations, though I think he's proven himself quite effective there, a lot of people thought, well, he was consistently and constantly challenging Netanyahu for the leadership of Likud, and so Netanyahu wanted him away, out of sight, out of mind, and gave him a planned job, therefore. Tell us about Erdan and the challenges he's walking into.
Netanyahu needs to separate Gilad Erdan and Gideon Sa'ar, okay? So that's point one, okay? Point A. He needs to separate between, because, it makes Gideon Sa'ar much weaker when Gilad Erdan is not there to challenge Netanyahu. Gilad Erdan is not in a position to challenge Netanyahu anyway at the moment. I think personally, I know Gilad since we were very young. Yariv Levin was elected Speaker of the Knesset, is a mate, as they say, from law school in the Hebrew University. Very, very different ideology than mine, but a very decent man, very decent politician. So that is also important. We need to bear that in mind, that's a merit, that's a value that we should hope that our politicians will hold. I think Gilad Erdan, I don't think any politician or any diplomat can hold both positions of the UN and Washington, D.C. I think in that respect, I think it's crazy, okay? And I don't think that it's going to be holding for a very long time. Don't forget that Danny Danon, who was sent to the UN, and nobody exactly knew what he was going to do, and he was pretty good, but he had Nikki Haley and Samantha Power there. I mean, right. You have these mega female powers there. I mean, we never had anything like that in the UN. I mean, that was an experience of a lifetime for the state of Israel. In that respect, I mean, when I came to AIPAC and Nikki Haley was speaking there, I was gonna, Haley for president. I mean, that was a sentiment. She's so good, and it's really amazing. But I think we're going to have a lot of challenges when the Trump plan comes on. The deal of the century, as they call it, is going to be on the table, and we're going to have a lot of challenges that are not only, America is just one challenge, and I think a lot of things are going to be happening in America with everything, and I think it's an opportunity to say how sorry I am for the major crisis that America is going through at the moment with COVID-19 and all the deceased. We look from here, and our hearts are with America. So I think please bear that in mind, that we're with you. But I think, the economic challenges are going to be so huge, but Israel is going to have a huge challenge from Europe. Diplomatic-wise, the European Union, it's going to be a very, very, very major issue in coming months, up until the elections in America and what's going to happen, in America in come November, which is really something that none of us can expect, especially after I watched Hillary. So nobody can tell what's going to happen in America. But the challenges are going to be huge when it comes to diplomacy. It's in that respect, that's one of the reasons that I thought that Gantz and Ashkenazi should be there, to kind of balance things.
Mm-hmm. So Ashkenazi's been made the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of talk over the years, and in fact I know it to be the case, that Netanyahu proactively wanted to get the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, especially when he was Minister for Foreign Affairs. Is Ashkenazi going to walk into a ministry that's ill-equipped to deal with the challenges that you've just expressed and described?
First of all, historically, something should be said. Historically, always the Prime Minister's office, even when I was there with Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister's office was always leading the general policy of foreign affairs. I mean, it's not the specifics, but the general policy of the Israeli government was led usually from the Prime Minister's office for reasons that are very, very obvious to anyone who understands the extent of threats that Israel is going through. I think that it's going to be much harder to kind of grope from Ashkenazi, kind of weakening the foreign affairs ministry. I mean, first of all, unfortunately, at the moment, it's the weakest it's ever been.
Right.
So, if anything, I hope that Ashkenazi will be able to kind of give them again, the pride that they deserve, the authorities that they, they're. I can tell you from experience. I actually started my public career when I came to America as a 17-year-old on behalf of the Israeli Foreign Ministry to give lectures in schools and colleges, etc. It was a fantastic foreign affairs ministry for several years. Unfortunately, Netanyahu kind of, took chunks of the ministry and gave them to other offices, the strategy, the office for strategic, ministry for strategic issues, the ministry for intelligence. Really, really, really unacceptable. No reason for that happening, and I do hope that it will really again regain its power, but also the respect that it deserves.
So let's talk about the Trump peace plan, because what you've said, I'm so pleased to hear you say that, and as you know, I'm on the right of center of the political spectrum, especially when it comes to security. But the reason Rosita and I so much enjoy bringing you to lecture to our delegations in Israel is we know that you're center, some might say center left, but you're very, very dedicated to Israel's security. Very dedicated to Israel's security.
You actually didn't mention that for some reason. I don't know. Wikipedia kind of brushes it off. I was a member of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee, so for 2 years.
And so I think that you're someone who absolutely we'd like to get the opinion of. There's this movement that I'm seeing in the media, Ayelet, of people, particularly people on the right, who are saying, we'll accept the annexation part of the Trump deal, we reject the Palestinian state aspect of the Trump deal. And I think that's complete nonsense. I just don't see that that's...
Irrelevant.
Tell us your thoughts.
It's listen up. If anything, if I understand anything about President Trump, and I don't consider myself a Trump expert by all means, and God help us, please don't take any chloroquine if you don't need to. No, honestly, I'm concerned about people that are going to take it seriously. So the thing is, if anything can be said, is that it's very, very obvious that he means business, in the sense that if you are taking the plan, then you don't just take chunks, that are comfortable, that are convenient to you. I want to really stress it. I don't know how strongly I can stress it. If any harm is done to the peace accords with either Egypt or Jordan, and Jordan is more at risk at the moment, I think it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Israel's eastern border must continue to be safe by that agreement, by that accord. I was there when Yitzhak Rabin and King Hussein signed the agreement. I was there in the Arava. This is not an accord that we can afford to risk. And in that respect, I do think that Netanyahu is going to be kind of acting declaratively. He's going to be trying to create a declaration. As a member of parliament, I can tell you that several times members of Knesset on the right were trying to bring on annexation of Ma'ale Adumim, okay? He won't put it on the table because he knows that the price, it's not obvious that we will be able to carry the price, to carry the toll of what it means. And I can tell you that I told him personally and publicly that I would have voted for it. And I wasn't the only member of Labour Party who would have voted, or at least wouldn't have been present to, definitely wouldn't vote against annexation of Ma'ale Adumim.
You would not have voted against extending sovereignty to Ma'ale Adumim.
Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. And he knew that. And he still didn't bring it on because he knows that it's too risky. Now, he's not going to be able to take the part of a plan that is comfortable for him and the other part to leave aside. It's not going to be working like that. And just bear in mind that Europe is still the greatest destination market for Israel's export. So that is something that we need to bear in mind. I will fight with all my heart, as nowadays I'm a vice president of the industrialist organization in Israel, which is really one of the largest organizations, economic organizations in Israel, probably the largest. And I can tell you that I am fighting with all my heart against any kind of labeling, against any kind of boycott. That's very, very obvious, but still we're working very hard at it. But we can't risk losing the accord with Jordan. We can't risk it.
So you feel that accord with Jordan is so strategically vital that it's not to be tampered?
Oh, there's no question as to the importance of strategy. The one thing that you need to bear in mind, Benjamin, and thank you for all the participants, is that it's going to be very hard to go back on it. I mean, if they are going to be revoking or abolishing the agreement with Israel, it's going to be very hard to go back on that. Okay? And Netanyahu, in that respect, was working very, very hard on the eastern part of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, etc., etc., etc. It's not worth risking what he has built, and definitely not what Yitzhak Rabin has been able to achieve with the late King Hussein.
Now let's talk about the other side of it, the side that people are less enthusiastic about, which is there. It's in black and white. It's very clear. It's not actually spoken about. And in fact, it wasn't even acknowledged in the unveiling of the Trump piece when you had to open it up and read it to realize what was there. The establishment of a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria with these corridors of contiguity, the tunnels, so on and so forth. Does that look tenable to you, Ayelet? Do you think that that's going to come about? Can it work?
My husband was on the security team of the Oslo Accords, of the second Oslo Accords. I remember myself speaking to him about details of the Trump peace plan. A lot of the things there are not viable, okay? Obviously, I'm also very, very concerned about Palestinian state, but it's very, very obvious to me. One thing I know, if we want to maintain Israel as a democratic Jewish state, or Jewish democratic for me, okay, still Jewish democratic for me, and again, as you mentioned, I come from the center left. If we want to maintain that, we can't afford to have 6 million Palestinians from the west to the east. We can't afford that. It's not going to be, Israel is not going to be the same. It's very, very obvious. So we need to think what we are doing and what is viable. It was very interesting to see during COVID-19, all of a sudden, that I was very, very concerned, and I was very, very much engaged in what was going on Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, and mainly in the Gaza perimeter with the Israeli kibbutzim and moshavim. I was very, very much. I went there every week. They're very. I'm still really. This is a beautiful, beautiful part of Israel, and it's really unthinkable what they have been going through. And it's amazing to see during COVID-19, nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing.
Right.
No missiles being shot, no balloons, no nothing. It's all of a sudden they have all of a sudden they have a real quality of life. And it's more than 20. It's going on 20 years now. It started in 2001 before Israel left the Gaza Strip. So it's very, very interesting to see how we can cooperate when things are concerning to both people, both Palestinian Authority. Even, unfortunately, Hamas, Netanyahu has been negotiating with Hamas for several years now. And, even though he maintains the position that he's not been negotiating with them, but how does Qatari money go in there? Who are we negotiating with when we are speaking about Hadar Goldin and Oron Shaul, our MIA soldiers still there? We're speaking to Hamas. Sometimes it's with the negotiations of, with the brokers, the mediation of the Egyptians, but a lot of the time it's not.
So on that, I want to ask a quick question before I jump topics, and it comes from David. And he asks, in response to your views about the strategic centrality of our accords with Jordan, do you think that Israel risks giving Jordan the power of veto by being too sensitive to the threats that are coming from Jordan with regard to extending sovereignty over the Jordan Valley?
It's not an interest when it comes to power. There is no balance in power. Right. Jordan is much bigger than Israel. Okay, this is not the right balance, and you can't. This is not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is Jordan is mostly concerned with becoming the Palestinian state. Okay, this is what concerns King Abdullah more than anything. You need to be sensitive about your foes more than you need to be sensitive sometimes about your friends. This is very, it sounds very, very strange, but that's reality of things. When you're completely surrounded by foes, by enemies, this is what you need to do. So, for instance, for 25 years, Israel was holding Tzofar and Naharaim, which were two very, very small places where the land was worked by Israeli farmers. We unfortunately lost these very, very small parts of Jordan. We lost them to Jordan because we didn't negotiate in the right way with the Jordanians. We are, kind of sticking a finger in their eye sometimes and not understanding what it means, when having the, I don't know if you remember, we had several incidents in Jordan in past years. I don't want to go back to it because it's too much details, but we have several incidents when we're really, really poking a finger in their eye. So we need to assess what is the risk. And from my perspective, and it's not my perspective, I'm not a security personality, but by all means, I don't know one chief of the IDF who claims that it's not dangerous to risk the accord with Jordan. I don't know one person, really. I don't, even on the right. I think even if you ask Yoav Gallant, I think he'd be concerned with the annulment of the agreement with Jordan. So it's not vetoing. It's not vetoing. It's being, I think, in diplomacy, there is something called being considerate. Being considerate is something to be aware, to keep your eyes open and understand the sensitivity of your foe.
So
Thank you, David, for the question.
And on the theme of consideration, one of the things that we love to do here at the Miriam Institute is to bring these different viewpoints from the left, the center, and the right, and have those promoted for the consideration of the listener. And so that they can be better informed as to what motivates you, what undergirds your policies, what undergirds your positions. And I want to talk to you about an issue that I think will be of significance to the listeners, which is what's going on in the political left at the moment and what you see, and perhaps you can even give some personal interactions that I know you've had when it comes to the Labour Party or Israeli Labour working with the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, which we know has had a rash of long-standing anti-Semitic incidents and had an anti-Semite at the helm until very, very recently, Jeremy Corbyn. And then you have a situation in the United States where, in my opinion, I'm zoning you in on the left just so that the listeners understand, because you're somebody who identifies with the left. So I want your perspective on this, or the centre-left, or whatever it may be, but you're from the Avodah party. So that's why I'm sticking to the left, and when I bring something to the right, I'll deal with the right. But I want to talk to you, I want people to hear from you about it, because you also have a situation in the United States where, without any question, there is anti-Israel sentiment setting in the Democratic Party, and I would say, I do say anti-Semitic sentiment that is gaining ground in the Democratic Party, some of it, incidentally, by Jews themselves. I'm thinking, for example, about the former candidate Bernie Sanders as one example, but you have Omar and Tlaib and the Squad and so on and so forth. What is your view of the left when it comes to Israel and the Jewish people?
Just a second.
Take it home.
I don't know what happened. Is that symbolism?
That's a hard-hitting question.
No, symbolism to the situation of the left, unfortunately. Just a second.
Take your time.
I don't know what happened. Okay. I have no idea what happened, by the way. The situation in the left in Israel. Wow. Oh my God.
Heather, take your time. Take another drink.
Just a second. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. Am I gaining my voice back? It sounds like I am.
Slowly, slowly.
Okay. Situation of the left in Israel is very, very difficult at the moment. A lot of it, I'm saddened to say, lies on what I said earlier, is when, the left was labeled and tagged diabolical. And I think in that respect, even I kind of regretted myself that I kept saying, that I'm extreme centrist, even though that's what I am, because it was kind of me cooperating with this, this sentiment that if you're left wing and you wish for a Palestinian state for the sake of the state of Israel, like Tzipi Livni, for instance, okay, then you are immediately shamed and incited against, etc., etc., etc. It scared people off. Now, the interesting thing is, I spoke about the generals earlier. Most generals in Israel still, even though some are on the right, most of them still hold positions that are very much having our hands very strongly on the security will, but understanding that eventually we need to separate from the Palestinians in somewhat way. Now, I'm not even talking about the way that we were going to be doing it, okay? I'm not talking about a Palestinian state, but a mere fact that we need to separate from the Palestinians, okay? For the sake of maintaining a Jewish and democratic state. It's very, very strange what's have been happening in the world when it comes to left and right, because we see also in Europe, we see a very, very big inclination, very big tendency to the right in certain countries. In some countries, you do see the left. The Labour Party in Israel has completely disconnected from the Labour Party, from Jeremy Corbyn. When he was presiding, as you all know, I went to the Labour conference myself to speak against Jeremy Corbyn while he was the chairman of the party. I don't think I have rejoiced as much as when he lost the elections in Great Britain. Really, and I'm also very, very saddened about what's going on in Great Britain. But we were very, very concerned for the British Jewish community. They have gone through horrendous times while he was in power. When it comes to the Democratic Party in America, it's a little bit different, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, for the years that I was a member of Knesset, I was very, very concerned about Israel becoming a partisan issue. Israel should never be a partisan issue in America. As you said, when you have someone from the right, you ask him about the anti-Semitism on the right. But one of the things that I kept saying, and I wrote several articles about it, is that I would always fight anti-Semitism when it comes from the left and when it comes from the right. Some of the times in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu would hug virtually nowadays, obviously, but he strongs very, very close relationship with the Visegrad group, which is Hungary, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. I think I must be, but definitely Hungary and Poland are there. Czech Republic maybe. Anyway, he strongs very, very very, very close relationship with them. Viktor Orban is an anti-Semite. He's not anti-Israel. He's anti-Semite. Now, it's very, very, you can't hold the position, with that when he's for Israel, then he's not an anti-Semite, okay? From my perspective, Jeremy Corbyn was both. When it comes to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in America, obviously, I don't want to speak about Bernie Sanders. I was very much as a person who lives in Israel is allowed, I was very much wishing for him to lose the primaries in the Democratic Party, and I'm also concerned about Ilham Omar and AOC. I watched I listened to them, I watched them, but Israel needs the Democratic Party too, and that is very, very obvious. We're going to be needing the Democrats that are Joe Biden, is pro-Israel, even though he was the vice president of Barack Obama. Barack Obama had a very, very bad foreign policy. From my perspective, very bad foreign policy. But he wasn't all bad for Israel, in spite of the JCPOA, okay? I mean, what we're doing, what Israel needs is full support from both sides of the aisle. And that is something that concerned me. In that respect, it's different than Great Britain. It's not the same. And as long as we are beyond, we can never be beyond reproach. Israel is now a very strong country, but as long as we are not a partisan issue, it's okay. When President Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, I was very saddened to see that the delegation did not include any members of the House from the Democratic side. And I was I was concerned about it, and I was also saddened by it. And I think the right thing for Israel is to make sure that we have both sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. And that I say as a centrist, as a leftist, as a rightist, I think it's the interest of any Israeli.
So let me ask you a quick question that I've had asked of me, that I think people would appreciate hearing from you. And I'm asking you again because you have a kinship with the left ideologically and so on and so forth. Although, as you've demonstrated, you can clearly pass it out. You don't think in one way, in a blanketed way about any.
There's no black and white. I'm just not a dichotomic person. There's no 0-1 solution. When it comes to Israel, nothing in Israel is 0-1.
So what would you say to a Democrat, a Jewish Democrat, who, and I know that they're on this call, who say that they're very, very torn. They're torn about the lack of pro-Israel statements, the lack of condemnation of anti-Israel statements, but they don't feel that they can
very frustrating
vote for the other side. What do you want that Jewish American voter to keep in mind?
First of all, I'm also frustrated, Pardon?
That Jewish American Zionist voter, what do you want them to keep in mind when they go to the poll?
Obviously, that they would have, that the candidate does have the best interest in mind for Israel as well. I don't expect, I think it's Israel is 72. I think it would be disrespectful to America to say that you should only think about Israel when you're going to vote and when you're going to post your poll. I think it's even, I would say, even dishonest of me to say something like that. It's disrespectful. But I do want them to make sure that they demand some kind of commitment to the state of Israel, to the security of the state of Israel. Obviously, again, as we mentioned before, America is going through major crisis of its own. I don't know, by the way, how it's going to affect on the economic relationship between Israel and America and the aid that America, and thank you very much to all you American citizens, you really have had our backs for many years. And I really appreciate this continuous aid. But again, I do expect the Democratic candidate, not just by the mere fact that he has Jewish voters, but for the understanding that Israel, despite of everything, and there is, a lot of things have been going on in past years, but despite of everything, Israel still is America's strongest ally. Probably not just in the Middle East, probably in the world. So I think this is something that I hope, again, that it runs through the Democratic mind. I think, by the way, that's part of the reason that Bernie Sanders, in spite of a very strong start, I think that's part of why he's lost.
Well, I hope so. I hope that they were repudiating those ideas. We have a few minutes for questions, Ayelet. I want to get to those if you can
Sure.
A few more minutes. It goes back to the first one that I'm going to ask you is from Albert, and it actually goes back to a statement that you made with regard to the embassy. Here, Albert asks you, do you think that the new government will encourage other nations to join the US in moving their embassies to Jerusalem?
I think past government has done it. I think it wasn't very successful. I respected the symbolism, by the way. The story runs that I kind of demanded to be there for the ceremony, which was true because they hadn't planned to invite the members of Knesset from the left. And I made sure that all members of Knesset are invited to the ceremony in the foreign ministry. We weren't invited, by the way, to the actual ceremony itself, but that wasn't, by the way, that wasn't that important. They only invited the born in America members of Knesset, and I totally understood the limitations. But I think we have been pushing for other countries to do that. Some countries in South America have kind of declared that they're going to be doing it. But again, it's symbolism. It's important to me. But it's not the most important thing. It's not the most important thing. For me, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, never to be divided. I mean, it's when you don't have a question about your nationality, you don't make others. You don't feel the obligation to have others like reassure you. Israel is the capital of Israel is Jerusalem, and it's going to stay united.
So this question comes from Harold, and he's talking about the move of some diaspora Jews away from the cause of Israel. And he says that there are Jews in the diaspora who clothe their non-support of Israel in the argument that they don't approve of certain Israeli politicians and certain policies. What would you say to those individuals who are disenfranchising from Israel because of specific policies, or as he says, because under the guise that they don't approve of certain policies?
First of all, I want to tell you that from my perspective, it's one of the greatest strategic dilemmas, challenges of Israel, how to hug the diaspora. From my perspective, diaspora is like natural gas for Israel. It's the same thing. It's like the one single human most important resource from Israel, aside our ability to hopefully create an immune for COVID-19 and the huge challenge that we have here with by the way, not just the Jewish geniusity, also we have here Arab geniuses. I mean, it's amazing what has been happening. You have to harbor these things, you have to help these things to happen. And I think in that perspective, Israel has an immense potential that hasn't been exhausted up until now. Thank you for your question, Harold. I'm very, very much concerned about disenfranchising from Israel. The only thing that I can tell them is that they need to stick there, to stick by us, because I think eventually the core values are there. I'm concerned about issues like the Wailing Wall and the sentiment that Jews who are reforms, Reconstructionists, conservatives don't feel at home there. It's ruled by orthodoxy. I understand that sentiment. I think one of the things that the government should address is this issue, and it should be solved by now. But the cause of Israel still remains the same. We are the house of all the Jews in the world. Hasn't changed, will never change. I can tell you something interesting about the president of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, whom I love. When he was a politician, he didn't put that much. Didn't think it was that important to maintain connection with the diaspora. When he became president, he spoke about the 4 tribes. He spoke about the secular, about the ultra-Orthodox, about the national religious, and about the non-Jews, the Arabs, the Cherkess, the Druze. And then he added a 5th tribe, and he added the tribe of the diaspora. And from my perspective, that was one of the most important messages that we could have conveyed to world Jewry. I'm still very much concerned about it, and I do things that are important to the diaspora. And I invite you to drag me to any kind of effort that you will be doing, either in the Miriam Institute or in general. Any effort in that direction, I'm there. So I'm a soldier.
So just to bring us to the top of the hour, I want to say that Rosita and I were so very much looking forward to hosting you in the United States before the COVID-19 pandemic took hold, and we hope to bring that about, and we hope that you'll come here and debate and lecture and bring your voice to the campuses, to the communities, and also to the Congress and beyond. Thank you for everything you do. I want to finish with rapid fire questions, yes, no, okay? Just a yes or
sure.
Right. Can you do that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Benny Gantz, Prime Minister in 18 months, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Is it time for a female Prime Minister of the State of Israel? Another female?
Hell yes. Hell yes.
Hell yes. Are you planning to return to the political?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so.
And finally, will you give us the opportunity to bring you here, to have you lectured, to debate, and will you please commit to staying engaged in the public square, in the public space? Your voice is so very important. And will you join me, incidentally, in wishing a mazal tov, a congratulations, to several graduates of the Law and Policy Tour who you lectured to in Israel, Ayelet, and who are now on the floor because of you, and they've just graduated from their legal studies. Nadine is somebody on this call, and she did it via Zoom. But Nadine, on behalf of everyone, on behalf of Rosita and you, we wish everybody, all the graduates, a mazal tov. I'm sure you'll second that. Thank you so very much. Thank you for being with us. That's the end of this call. I hope we'll have you back very soon. And thank you to all of our guests.
I would love to join you. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well. Take care, Ayelet.
Thank you very much. Keep well and keep safe, please.